All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're talking about one of the absolute most brilliant scientific quests of our time, the invention of the blue LED. It's a literal underdog story where a few renegades took on the entire scientific community and won. And, they completely changed how we see the world in the process.
To kick things off, have you ever stopped to wonder how the screen you're looking at right now, your phone, your TV, creates those millions of vivid colors? I mean, we stare at these screens all day long, but the basic tech behind those colors was actually stalled for decades, literally just waiting for one elusive missing piece. It's kind of like mixing paint. You need the primary colors of light, red, green, and blue, to make white and pretty much every other color in the spectrum. Now, scientists had actually knocked out red and green LEDs way back in the 1950s and 60s. You probably remember seeing them in old digital watches or chunky calculators. But blue? Blue was completely missing. The entire world just waited for decades. Which brings us to Section 1. Why was blue so hard? This was an impossible challenge that stumped the brightest scientific minds for a whole generation.
So you're probably asking, why couldn't they just, make a blue one? Well, the huge roadblock here is something called the band gap. Think of a band gap as the energy difference between a high and a low electron state inside a semiconductor. If you look at the visible light spectrum, pumping out a photon of blue light takes way more energy than red or green. Because of that, it needs a material with a much larger band gap. And to pull that off, the crystal structure of the material had to be practically flawless. If there was even a tiny defect, the electrons would get disrupted, and instead of getting that nice blue light, you'd just get useless heat.
Take a look at how this actually works in practice. You've got these different layers of semiconductor materials. On one side, you have high-energy negative electrons, and on the other, you have positively charged empty sites. Scientists just call them holes. When you apply electricity, the electrons and the holes are pushed into that middle active layer. They smash together, recombine, and boom, a tiny beam of light shoots out. But again, to get that specific blue light, the material hosting this little collision had to be absolutely pristine. But getting that crystal perfect was phenomenally hard. So hard, in fact, that for 30 long years, thousands of researchers and massive tech giants completely struck out. I'm talking hundreds of millions of dollars totally down the drain. Eventually, the industry kind of just threw their hands up and assumed LEDs were never going to replace traditional light bulbs.
Moving on to Section 2, choosing the impossible material, because this right here is the dramatic crossroads of our story.
By the 1980s, the scientific world had basically split into two camps. The heavy favorite, zinc selenide. Everyone loved it because it matched existing substrates easily, which made growing high-quality crystals a lot easier. To put this in perspective, at a major physics conference in 1992, the zinc selenide sessions had over 500 people in the room. But then, there was gallium nitride. Everyone thought this stuff was a complete dead end because it had this massive 16% mismatch when grown on sapphire, making it heavily defected and basically useless. The gallium nitride talks at that exact same conference, a grand total of 5 attendees. 5. But in a classic underdog move, 3 of those people, Shuji Nakamura, Islamu Akasaki, and Hiroshi Amano, bet their entire careers on it.
These guys were absolute pioneers. They completely ignored established science and took a massive leap of faith. They even built their own custom MOCVD ovens, these giant, super complex chemical vapor deposition reactors. And after thousands of failed experiments, they finally did it. They grew high-quality gallium nitride crystals. If you look at this tiny LED chip with its little gold wire contacts, it is literally no bigger than a grain of sand. Incredible, right? All right, let's get to Section 3, the glorious blue breakthrough, the moment in the early 90s that shocked the entire world. After 3 decades of everyone else failing, Shuji Nakamura, who was working at this small chemical company called Nichia, pulled it off. Just look at that glorious, true blue LED glowing right there. By 1993, he had engineered a device so insanely bright, you could easily see it shining in broad daylight. Now, for this to actually sell in the real world, the industry knew a blue LED had to hit at least 1,000 microwatts of power. For context, earlier prototypes from other scientists were totally sputtering out at around 42 microwatts. Not even close. But Nakamura's 1993 gallium nitride LED, it cranked out an astonishing 1,500 microwatts at exactly 450 nanometers. He didn't just break the commercial barrier, he completely shattered it. The rest of the electronics industry was, frankly, stunned. They had completely written off gallium nitride, and suddenly this tiny, relatively unknown startup is dominating the market overnight. Nichia called a press conference in Tokyo, and it prompted one shocked Toshiba researcher to give us this hilarious, but honestly, perfectly accurate quote.
Everyone was caught with their pants down. The race was over. The underdogs had won.
Which brings us to Section 4, Magic Trick, creating white light. We finally had our high-power blue, which unlocked the ultimate party trick.
Okay, so yes, you can mix red, green, and blue LEDs to make white light, but it actually turns out that's not the best way to light up a room. So how do we get the white light you see in modern bulbs today? It is actually brilliantly simple. Step 1, you take that high-energy blue LED. Step 2, you coat it with a very specific yellow phosphor. And step 3, that phosphor absorbs a bit of the blue light and re-emits it as a longer yellow wavelength. To our human eyes, that exact mix of blue and yellow registers as bright, pure white light. Magic, right? If we look at the actual data behind this, check out that phosphor-converted model on the far left. See how the sharp blue peak from the LED combines perfectly with that nice broad curve of the yellow phosphor? Together, they just blanket the visible spectrum. This exact method is literally what is lighting up the screen you're staring at right now and the bulbs sitting up in your ceiling.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, lighting up our world. Let's talk about why this actually matters for our planet, way beyond just giving us nicer TVs.
These white LED bulbs are absolute superheroes for the environment. I mean, think about this. An old-school incandescent bulb only turns about 5% of its electricity into actual light. The other 95% completely wasted as heat. But a modern LED bulb, it converts roughly 50% of its energy into light. That is a massive 15 to 20 times jump in efficiency. Plus, unlike those curly fluorescent tubes, they have absolutely zero toxic mercury. They last forever, and the technology lets you customize them to get over 50,000 different shades of white.
When you consider how much global electricity goes just toward keeping the lights on, this invention is actively saving an unbelievable amount of energy and resources. It's even making solar-powered lighting possible in places without an electrical grid. For this absolute, planet-changing achievement, Isamu Akasaki, Hiroshi Amano, and Shuji Nakamura rightfully took home the 2014 Nobel Prize in Physics.
It is such an incredible testament to the scientific spirit.
I want you to think about the phone, or the tablet, or the TV you're watching this on right now. Seriously, take a close look at that bright, beautiful screen. Because that vibrant display, it's powered by an incredible engineering marvel hiding just beneath the surface. We're talking about an innovation that makes up an $80 billion industry today. It illuminates everything from our living rooms to our city streets, and it's basically the reason the digital devices we rely on every single day are even possible. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth was blue such a big deal? Well, we actually had red and green LEDs for a long, long time. They were invented way back in the 1950s and 60s and were used in things like old digital watches, pocket calculators, and, those little red standby lights on your stereo. But physicists knew that if they ever wanted to use LEDs to actually illuminate a room, they absolutely positively needed the blue LED. Why? Because you need the triad of red, green, and blue combined to produce pure white light. Without blue, LED technology was pretty much forever stuck just being a tiny indicator light rather than a true usable light source. But here's the really cool part. There's a brilliant shortcut to creating that white light. You actually don't have to mix red, green, and blue together every single time. Instead, engineers use a super clever workaround by taking a highly efficient blue LED and coating it with a special yellow glowing powder called a phosphor. Something incredible happens. That phosphor absorbs some of the blue light and re-emits it at longer wavelengths. So to the human eye, this perfectly tuned combination of blue and yellow is perceived as brilliant, pure white light. Boom, you have the modern LED bulb. And the advantages here are just staggering. I mean, traditional incandescent bulbs, they're essentially just tiny space heaters that happen to give off a little bit of light as a byproduct. They waste roughly 95% of their energy simply generating heat. But this solid-state technology, on the other hand, converts electricity directly into light particles, or photons, right through a semiconductor material. That means it stays cool to the touch, lasts tens of thousands of hours longer, and, totally unlike fluorescent bulbs, contains absolutely no toxic mercury. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that these amazing white LEDs are up to 15 to 20 times more efficient than those old-school incandescent light bulbs. Let that sink in for a second. 20 times more efficient. This is exactly why they are sparking a massive revolution in solid-state lighting. By switching to LEDs, we are literally saving unimaginable amounts of electricity on a global scale. It's a massive, massive win for our power grids, our wallets, and of course, the environment. And honestly, the most mind-blowing part of all this is the scale. The actual light-emitting diode chip inside the bulb is literally the size of a grain of sand, just tiny. But despite being incredibly small, the light output is intensely powerful. And because it requires almost zero physical footprint, engineers have been able to integrate its superpowers into practically every single piece of modern technology we own. We're talking about the ultra-bright flash on your smartphone camera and the LCD screens on your video game tablets. It's sitting right there in the backlight of your flat-screen TV, it's illuminating the display on your smartwatch, and it's even beaming invisible signals from your TV's remote control. This tiny hero is truly everywhere, just seamlessly integrated right into the fabric of our daily lives. Okay, so we've covered lighting and screens, but what happens when you push this technology even further? Because the exact same fundamental physics that brought us the blue LED also unlock the blue diode laser. And lasers, unlike the dispersed spreading light of an LED bulb, emit a cutting, sharp, highly concentrated beam of light. And this is where it gets incredibly cool for data storage. Because blue light sits at the shortwave end of the visible spectrum, a blue laser has a much shorter wavelength than the old red or infrared lasers we used to use in CD and DVD players. Think of this super short wavelength like a finer pen tip. It allows us to pack information much more tightly onto a disk. By utilizing the blue laser, we can store 4 times more data in the exact same physical space. And that is exactly what made high-definition Blu-ray movies possible. But blue lasers aren't just for watching movies. High-end car manufacturers are now using laser-based white light sources right in their headlights. Because a laser is so incredibly directional, these advanced headlights allow drivers to see significantly further down a dark road. And thanks to some really smart engineering, they can do this while precisely controlling the beam so it doesn't blind the other drivers coming the opposite way. It's essentially like giving your car literal supervision, and it's genuinely fascinating how they've engineered this whole system. Now, if laser headlights and high-def movies weren't futuristic enough for you, imagine using the actual light in your room to download your favorite games, music, and videos. See, mobile communications traffic is growing so insanely fast right now that our current radio frequency networks are really struggling to keep up. But surprise, surprise, this same solid-state technology is stepping up to solve this problem too through something called visible light communication. Using a brand new technology called Li-Fi, special micro-LEDs can blink on and off hundreds of millions of times a second. That is way faster than the human eye can even perceive. And by doing this, they can actually transmit data right through the light beams illuminating your room. While traditional Wi-Fi relies on invisible radio waves, Li-Fi uses the light itself, which enables multi-gigabit per second data rates. That means your desk lamp could literally become your ultra-fast internet router. How crazy is that? And the advantages extend way beyond just cool tech gadgets and fast internet. This technology is actively improving human health and saving the planet. Because LED colors can be perfectly controlled by computers, we can tune indoor lighting to match the natural alternations of daylight, which totally supports our natural biological clock and circadian rhythms. On top of that, modifications of this tech into ultraviolet LEDs allow us to sterilize polluted drinking water. They're even being tuned to specific wavelengths to optimize plant growth in indoor greenhouses, and hospitals are using them to reduce the spread of infections. It's a real game changer. Because it is such a world-changing technology with so many absolutely vital applications, the brilliant scientists who finally cracked the code to invent the efficient blue LED, Isamu Akasaki, Hiroshi Amano, and Shuji Nakamura were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2014. And the Nobel Committee specifically noted that their invention was awarded in the true spirit of Alfred Nobel, because it is an invention of the absolute greatest benefit to mankind. And why this matters, why it truly fundamentally benefits mankind, comes down to the real human impact. Right now, over 1.5 billion people around the world currently lack access to standard electricity grids. But because LEDs require so incredibly little power to operate, these communities can now brilliantly light up their homes using cheap, local solar power. A simple, inexpensive solar panel and an LED bulb can completely replace toxic, fire-prone kerosene lamps. This instantly elevates the quality of life, extends study hours for children, and actively drives economic growth in developing regions. That is huge. So, what started as an almost impossible quest to create a single blue light has completely transformed into the backbone of modern illumination, communication, and digital displays. We've seen how it saves massive amounts of energy, brings safe light to the darkest corners of the globe, and even promises to beam the internet right across our living rooms. So the very next time you turn on a light or look at a screen, ask yourself,